Welcome to Black Sheep's Time to Shine. This is the place where all the different kinds of black sheep can come together judgment-free. I'm Jared Mello, and please remember that the small things in life, they're the things that really matter. Life is made up of the small things, and if we can't do the small things right, we won't be able to do the big things right. And this is a reminder for me, just as much as it is for everyone else too, the reason why I carry these wands around, as a reminder to myself. Now in today's video, I'm going to go over my experience dating a female covert narcissist, and to reiterate, the big difference between a grandiose narcissist and a covert narcissist is how they go about getting their admiration and supply, and how they handle their sensitivity to criticism. And a grandiose narcissist will be more extroverted, more than likely. A covert narcissist will be more introverted and more prone to anxiety and depression. Now, it can be tricky on the covert side because since they're not as boisterous and loud, they can slip under the cracks a little bit. So the covert narcissist, they'll still seek supply, they'll still have the same traits of the grandiose narcissist, but they just go about getting them in a little different way. They might fish for compliments, they might do that on social media a lot too, fish for compliments, and their sensitivity to criticism, it'll be like an Eeyore thing sometimes, like, oh, I guess I'm just the worst person in the world, I guess you could do so much better than me, woe's me. And that's often how they will do it. Or they'll give a silent treatment as well. But they like to be a victim. Now, the grandiose narcissist, sometimes they can be the victim, but they'd rather be the hero of all the stories that they tell. So let's get into my experience with the covert narcissist. So I'd met a woman, and the love bombing started pretty quickly, where she would tell me how great she thought I was, how handsome I thought I was, how great all of the things I was doing were, and she had offered to do a photo shoot for me, take pictures of me, because she was a photographer. And during this, she love bombed me the whole way, told me how great she thought I was, how handsome she thought I was, and then, we hooked up that first night that we had done that together. And that was a big part of me falling hook, line, and sinker right there. Just that I was super attracted to her. She was soft-spoken, had a Brazilian accent, and I just wasn't expecting it. I just was not expecting this, because a lot of what I learned here was that I was in a bad spot. I was codependent. I wasn't happy on my own. I wasn't emotionally independent, so I was very vulnerable to a woman like this to come into my life, a more predatory type woman. And that's the other thing I learned from this whole scenario, is to take a look at my side of the street and think about what I could have done differently. What could I have done to prevent the situation from happening? Now, that doesn't mean it's my fault, everything that happened, but all we can do is look at what we could have done in our side of the street. So I will always advocate for doing that first. So in the love bombing there, I was just swept away, because they have a sixth sense for this too, mind you. A lot of narcissistic people, they have a sixth sense for who they're going to be able to manipulate and for who their charms will really work on. So we started hanging out, doing more things together, taking some road trips. And on one of the road trips, she told me, oh, I came down to get my license, and I come back in love with a Jared. And so, at the time, that really melted me, and I loved hearing that. But I didn't think much of, well, we don't really know each other. This relationship's pretty new, and she's already telling me she loves me. Now, part of this could have been the language barrier, but, I don't think so. Her English was pretty good. And right around that time, we would hang out and do fun things together. And the first red flag I saw was we were at a bar together, and I looked at another girl, and at the bar, she literally choked me at the bar and said, I get very jealous. And granted, when a woman says that, in this case, the covert narcissist case, it's often a projection. Their accusations are often confessions. And so I didn't know it at the time, but she was most certainly chatting to all sorts of guys as well. But here's the thing, I couldn't really be too upset, honestly, when it's all said and done, technically, because we were never boyfriend and girlfriend. We didn't have a committed relationship. I just assumed it after she said she was in love with me. And again, looking back at this now, it's ridiculous now. I think, what a gullible fool I was to be in that spot and believe a girl was in love with me in less than 2 weeks. It's like, yeah, that's ridiculous. I see that now as ridiculous, but that was the headspace I was in at the time. Vulnerable headspace, and I was ripe for the picking for someone like her to come around. So after we were at that bar, she told me I should just forget about her because it showed her maybe I wasn't perfect, that I looked at another girl. And she kind of pouted a little bit and threw herself on the bed and said, "You should just forget about me. I don't know you." And I just didn't pay any attention to it. And we still continued to hang out and etc. And then more red flags began to come up, and I ignored them all as they came up. The first one was her taking a trip across the country to California to see a dude. I got jealous, and this was the beginning of a little bit of a devalue. And then she would also say she would talk to a friend from jail, but that was a lie. It turns out that it was actually her boyfriend in jail, but she had told me second that, oh, it's my ex-boyfriend in jail, but no, it was her boyfriend in jail. I had also seen like condom wrappers on her bureau, and when I called her out on it, she said, "Oh, that's from months ago before I met you," and she ran in the bathroom and hid and pouted. But it's like, how are you going to leave a condom wrapper on the bureau? I mean, who does that? Part of me thinks that was a duper's delight where she enjoyed making me squirm. And that wasn't the only time she enjoyed making me squirm either. She was showing me pictures on her phone of the trip she had taken to California. And when she got to the picture of the guy that had his arm around her, she got all embarrassed and hid it. But again, I've mentioned before how NPD people will triangulate versus how borderline people will triangulate. An NPD person, what they'll do is they'll triangulate because they like making you jealous and they like seeing you squirm. So they get a little bit of duper's delight, and it makes them feel powerful when they do that. Powerful and superior. The BPD person will often triangulate so that their favorite person usually will give them more love and admiration. Now granted, it's an immature way to go about doing it, to try to provoke some jealousy to get it, but that's often what a borderline will do. So that was another red flag, her doing this with the phone. More red flags to come, of course, and again, I still ignored all of these. Another one was when I was watching dogs at a farm, and one of the dogs that I'd gotten really close to was being relocated. And when I told her about this, she said, "Oh, Jared, did you cry? And did you cry?" And she liked that I was kind of in distress about it and kind of bummed about it. Another red flag, that was like a schadenfreude on her part where she enjoyed me being miserable. And again, even as I say all this, it's so obvious there was something going on, but like I wanted to look past all of it. I wanted to see just the good in her. I had rose-colored glasses on, and no one could talk me out of it. She turned into like my favorite thing, and I was obsessed with her. This is what the love bombing did to me, where I thought I was going to marry this person. I thought she was my soulmate, the person that the universe put on this planet just for me. And I see now that was very naive, childish too even. But that's really what I thought. And I even told her this, and I said, we're going to have a fun, adventurous life together. And she just nodded, but she really wasn't on the same page at all. And she tried to claim later, "Oh, I didn't know this is how you felt, Jared." But no, like it was pretty evident, and I told her as well. But she acted like she didn't know. So more red flags, of course, though. More red flags. So finally, I think how it ended was there was a final ghosting, right? Where she had devalued pretty quickly, mind you. She had seen I wasn't perfect. I was probably being a little needy and approval seeking, which no women like, mind you. So the devalue came, And then the discard came. She just ghosted me for a while. And she went on a trip across the country again, this time to Colorado. And she had blocked me on one of her Instagram stories. And I reached out to her about it. And she had laughed at me and said, I block all Americans from my Instagram story. Again, another lie. And again, even though I'm being disrespected, even though she's devalued me, I still didn't care. And I was still desperate for her love and approval. So fast forward more. I was going to go to a movie premiere with her. I invited her because I still wanted her to join me. And instead of coming to this movie premiere, what happened was she told me a story why she couldn't make it. And she said, oh, this is actually what happened. What happened was I was going to sell a laptop, but it got stolen from me and I had to chase this guy down. Again, part of this is just narcissistic word salad, crazy making, and telling a story where she was simultaneously the victim and the hero. But it was just nonsense, narcissistic word salad. And to go back, one of the first times she went across the country to California, she told me a story about how some guy had smashed a hole in her windshield. And so her and the guy she was with, they were searching all night for the guy that did that. And more than likely, that was just another story too. Lots of stories, because the truth was, she was probably sleeping with that guy. So despite all of the disrespect and all the other tomfoolery, I was still on this page with her. I still really liked her. And there was other red flags I overlooked, such as on Instagram, she would travel all around the world, but she was always by herself in the pictures. And we're going to get to why that was here too. Now, when the final discard came for a little while, she had done something pretty tricky. During the love bombing phase, she had asked me why my previous relationships had ended. And then when it came for the discard, she had used those reasons and said, oh, you're just needy, you're just approval seeking. And I told her previously, I think some of my relationships had ended because of that. And she used those reasons later, which is something narcissistic people will do. When you're buttered up in the love bombing phase, they'll try to get as much dirt on you as possible because you're open and you're being vulnerable. And then they'll use those things against you later as leverage. So watch out for that. So I think one of the last times I saw her, or the second to last times I saw her, we went to a casino together and we were drinking. And that's when more of the truth came out about a lot of things. In particular, how she was a sugar baby and she was seeing multiple sugar daddies and she was sleeping with them all. Now, I believe she was telling me the truth because she was drinking, even though one of the only times I'd seen her after that, she tried to take it back and say, no, that was not true. But I tend to believe that she was telling the truth when she was drinking. Now, a narcissistic person, that's the only time they'll probably tell you the truth is if they're drinking. When they're sober, tons of lies, which is the opposite of a borderline woman, mind you, or a borderline man, is they will try to use drinking as an excuse as to why they did this, that, or the other. But when they're sober, the borderline person, that's when they can be truthful. But then they'll try to use their drinking or drug use as an excuse for bad behavior. But that's kind of a little bit of a tangent. So I learned that she was a sugar baby. And I guess maybe I felt lucky that I was getting it for free and all these guys were paying for it, but it wasn't much of a consolation, honestly, because I was being disrespected, I was codependent, but I was still stuck in a trauma bond. And all this time, even when we weren't really talking very much, she still made sure that she liked all of my posts, liked my comments, liked my photos, to keep me on the hook. Because a narcissistic person, they will always be open to supply, regardless of the stage of the relationship, whether it's love bombing, devaluing, or discarding. She'll still be open to anyone else. And I got, at one point, the I just want to be alone thing, which is, of course, they don't really want to be alone. They just mean that you, and in this case me, I was no longer working as the source of supply that I was in the beginning. and they want to either love bomb new people or they've been love bombing new people. They are working as a great source of supply, so they want to spend time with them. And that's really what it means when a narcissistic person says they want to be alone. So that's what was going down with all of that there, and I was just along for the ride, and I didn't know what the heck was going on. So after that day when she told me about the sugar daddies, there was another break involved, and I'd only seen her a couple more times, but I was stuck in the trauma bond because I refused to cut her off completely. And the only way in my experience to break the trauma bond is to block on all sources and cut them off. Now, if there's a co-parenting situation involved, or counter-parenting as a lot of people like to call it with a narcissistic parent, you have to talk to them a little bit. You have to go least amount of contact necessary, gray rock or yellow rock, but you can't cut them off, so it does become more difficult. But the best way usually is cut them off completely. You can't give it any oxygen because they will try to exploit it. And like I said, they will always be open to new sources of supply, but they like to make sure that their old sources of supply are still there in case something goes wrong with the new ones. They always want to come back. They call it the harem garage, where they can keep on going back to the well to old trusty sources of supply in case the new ones don't go as well. That's why they don't like closure. Closure would mean the other person could move on, but they like to keep it open-ended so the possibility of coming back is always there. So basically what happened was, in one of our times when we weren't talking, I was finally able to avoid her enough, and I blocked her on everything, and I was able to see through it. And I was finally able to see, okay, this is what's going on here. I see the childishness, I see the love bombing, I see the lies, I see the disrespect, and I see my side of the street too. I see what I was doing wrong. And I thought, what could I have done better so that this didn't happen again, or couldn't happen again? And practice radical self-respect was my answer. And I said, yeah, I wasn't happy on my own. I didn't have boundaries. I didn't stand up for myself. I wasn't assertive. I had a hole that I was trying to fill. I was vulnerable to this kind of person. And then I learned more about the kinds of people that fall into the narcissist traps, people that often had a narcissistic parent or other narcissists in their households, and they are susceptible to this. And I had a sixth sense moment with that as well. And ultimately, though, I had to do work on me. That's what it taught me. And I had to do the work. And we often have to do the work while single because it's tough to do this work with a partner. And we have to heal the parts of ourselves that was attracted to someone like that to begin with. Now, granted, this girl was very pretty, very attractive, but once I saw her acting how she was acting, I should have never let it get as far as it did on my end internally. And she had never let herself get there. She had liked me as a source of supply, but it was never really that serious for her. She always just thought it was casual. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there thinking I'm going to fall in love with this girl and she's going to be my wife and I'm going to marry her. And I was just way off base. But again, we weren't even boyfriend-girlfriend. But that's where my head took it because she said she was in love with me once. That's on me too. That's on me too. When we're on our own and we're good on our own, we're able to see red flags better. And we're able to kind of develop our own interests, our hobbies, our careers, our friendships, our physical health, our mental health, our emotional health. These are all the things we got to do when we're on our own. Hopefully, while we're not talking to the narcissistic person. That way, the trauma bond can heal. Because eventually, we might want to start dating again. We probably will. And then, we gotta pay attention. Because if we don't do the work on ourselves, we're more than likely just to find the same kind of person, just in somebody else. Another narcissistic person, just not the same person. And that's on us, though, if that happens. We got to pay attention to the red flags. And this goes back to my dating after a narcissist video. Keeping an eye open for how they disagree, How do they respond to boundaries? How do they respond to assertiveness or being told no? All of those things. How do they respond to treating people they perceive themselves to be better than? What happens when they don't get their way? There's all sorts of things we should be paying attention to. But that's the stuff that happens when we cut them off and we work on our own lives single. So this girl, she was, subtle. She was introverted, although she would dress pretty look at me like, which is because she had the need for admiration. And clearly she had the need for admiration and money. Even though she didn't care about the money sugar daddies would give her, she absolutely liked the attention. And she absolutely liked the adoration they would give her. And there's a lot of things I could have done better here, but I was just duped. I was susceptible to being duped because I just wasn't good on my own. So that's my story there with the female covert narcissist. I know it was a lot. There's a lot of stuff going on there, but I ultimately learned this is something that I wouldn't want to have happen again, but it was good for me. It was good for me because it forced me to take a look at my side of the street. And it's like that meme that says, when God or the universe puts someone in your life that's going to hurt you for character development, that's exactly how I chose to see it. And I think to myself, what better way is there to see it than that anyway? What am I going to be? Just a victim, if not that? And it's like I say, being a victim is not supposed to be the final destination. It's only supposed to be a step on the path to recovery. The rest of the recovery process is taking a look at our side and what we could have done better. And now, I could never imagine winding up with someone like that again. And perhaps there'll be different problems in my future relationships, but it won't be that version again. And we know we're healed from the trauma bond when we no longer think they will heal us or make us feel better with their presence. And we will think, actually, they are pretty childish. And we will see them for their true mental maturity level, which is that of a 7 or 8-year-old. And that is the point when they stopped maturing. That's the point that their trauma kicked in or their biology kicked in, and they just turn into one big trauma response, which is often what happens to narcissistic people. So they stop maturing, and they are full of internal shame and guilt and angst, and they project that onto the world. But they also want to project an image of success. That's why the truth is offensive to them when it doesn't meet their grandiose expectations, or they don't project the image they want to onto the world. The truth can be offensive to them, as Dr. Grande would say. But please comment below what you thought about this video. Maybe share your experience with a narcissist, a covert narcissist, or a grandiose narcissist. I'm sure many other people could relate either way. Like the video if you liked it. Hit the notification bell and subscribe if you haven't already. And also maybe let me know other kind of topics you would like to hear me talk about. And share this video with others that you think might benefit. So with that, thank you very much for watching and have a great rest of your day.